Ladies and gentlemen, Season 2, Episode 4, The Siege. This is Mandalorian in a nutshell. This episode right here. And I mean that. Both good, bad, and in between. This is everything that The Mandalorian has been. It's not bad. But it's very popcorn, you know? There really isn't a lot of meat on these bones, and there really isn't much going on, and there's very little to talk about. I actually found myself at one point doing my taxes in the middle of this. Now, I don't mean that as a negative thing, as absolutely bizarre as it sounds. It's just, there was nothing for me to discuss, there was nothing for me to analyze, so while I was enjoying the big action-y sequence, it was when they were escaping from the base. While I was enjoying the sequence, it was just, okay, this is fun. But that was it. And that, I know that sounds like an insult, but once again, I want to be sure. I want to be very clear that there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, exactly, Pelagius Snow. Good popcorn is good popcorn, and I enjoy good popcorn quite a bit. It's actually frustrating how rare it is. In fact, the only popcorn brand I can think of that I like, which I don't remember the name of right now, they don't even have around here, so I've been without popcorn for years at this point in my life. And you go to the theater, they have garbage. Ugh. They have, like, that weird, like, piss-scented stuff. And that's the point. I know this is kind of starting to stretch the analogy a little bit, but there really is a difference between good popcorn and bad popcorn. I've seen shows and movies and games that have bad action, right? That have bad popcorn. And it's just like... But this, I was having fun. Thumbs up. Give me one moment, please. I need to double check something real quick here. Yes, okay. I noticed Carl Weathers directed this, actually. Got that. I am happy to see him again, of course. And not just because of member berries. Because there's still some interesting stuff here. So, for example... let's go up to the top of my notes. There's a tiny little tidbit. And it's a little thing, but it's really good stuff. It's when he lifts his helmet just a little bit. You can just see his chin under there as he goes to sip some of his soup. Significance? That's the second, like, not counting when the IG unit healed him, that is the most he's ever been willing to remove that helmet at all. It says a lot about how close he's come to Baby Yoda at this point in time. How connected they are and how much he cares about the kid and treats him like he's a son. That's actually pretty powerful. Huge thumbs up for that moment. And it's understated, too. They don't need to see, you understand, I'm only willing to do this because I think of you as my child, right? That would be terrible. Instead, he just... There we go. That's also true, Blade Chaval. And yeah, the baby was like... Meow. Okay. Just gonna let that go. Agreed, Rax. There's definitely been... Season 2 is so weird. Because on the one hand, it's like, but on the other hand, it's a lot more polished in several directions. We cut to some of the thugs who have taken over the covert. In fact, on the off chance you missed it, they do a quick panning shot of where the Mandalorian symbol used to be. The Mythosaur symbol, or whatever it is. But... I just, again, no complaining. It's a quick and dirty pan of this is where we're set. And then Kara shows up, and we find out what she's been up to. Grief shows up. Two things about this scene, very quickly and dirty. First of all, he's got a beard now. Second of all, he's really happy to see Baby Yoda. I know this sounds like a weird thing, especially in something that tends to be as serious and dry as Star Wars, but I just like to think that a lot of people, upon seeing Baby Yoda again, should be like, hey! And we've already seen this with, Sally on Tatooine and Mos Eisley, and of course Grief, right? Hey, Baby Yoda is so cool, so cute. Is it Pelly? God, yeah, he acts like a grandpa. He does. He totally does. Has he been taking care of you? Has he been taking care of you? This poor ship. I feel so bad for this poor ship. Oh my god. This poor ship is just falling apart at the seams. They do a really, really good repair job in an extraordinarily short period of time, which actually kind of makes me raise an eyebrow at how quickly they were able to repair this thing. But let's move on for a second. There is some quick and dirty world building towards the beginning. First, there's a line that Grief says, "If the Empire could never settle the Outer Rim, what makes the New Republic think they can?" There's a lot of implication there, and I could dive down that particular rabbit hole, honestly, for hours. All I'm going to say is that Alchemist just gave me a sub, and I appreciate it very, very much. Thank you. Always appreciate. Give me a moment. I will go jot that down here really quick. FTL, Armored Core 6, and Borderlands 2. Thank you, Alchemist, always. So... sorry, I slipped on my neck weird. Rather than go down the rabbit hole completely, I want to share an anecdote that you may or may not find as funny as I do. When we were constructing our wars, we realized we had to do a bit of compression. That's the wrong word. Condensement? Condension? How do you condense something, but like as a past tense adverb? Whatever. We had to condense the setting in several ways, timeline-wise and physically, in terms of its actual geography. And one of the things we came up with, and I'm going to give Kira White Noise full credit on this because it was her idea initially, was the idea that there is a very big gap between the Outer Rim and the core worlds, and like literally in terms of travel speed, in terms of terrain, in terms of how hyperspace works, etc. Hence the concept of trunks and branches when it comes to hyperlanes. The significance here is that the biggest mistake the Old Republic ever makes in our wars is trying to just claim the Outer Rim, just saying, yep, planting a flag there and saying this is ours, and that action is going to be the first domino in a huge sequence of actions that leads directly to the formation of the Galactic Empire, because it was a terrible, terrible idea. And you kind of get the same vibe. You see why I was reminded of this. Because, yeah, sure, the New Republic could just say this is ours. They've got the manpower, they've got the material. If they don't disband their military, they've got the armament. So they could actually patrol this, right? They could actually deal with this. But they have none of the infrastructure necessary to actually make that worthwhile. It would be a gargantuan black hole of time and lives and money and resources and ships and supplies. Think about the supply chains alone, for God's sakes. This would be a huge problem. And the locals also generally don't want them here, even though they have been more or less a lot more positive. And we've seen this. Every time we've seen a New Republic pilot, which is our main representation for them, they've been pretty cool. But that doesn't mean they're welcome here. So it would make a tremendous amount of sense for the New Republic to just kind of hands off this whole thing. Except for the fact that that then makes this area a hotbed for the other side. Right? Yeah, exactly. They have a much less centralized perspective, which makes sense. Republic as opposed to Empire. But also, again, it allows the Galactic Empire, because let's call it what it is, the Kmart Galactic Empire, to operate out here freely, which they are doing. And even I hate to skip ahead to the end of the episode, but it's clear that at least some people are fully aware of the fact that this is a problem. That the Imperial Remnant is actively operating out here and is moving with impunity because the locals just don't have the firepower to push against warlords who have ex-Imperial tech. So you see how there's this interesting balancing point here between the New Republic not wanting to just move in, but also they can't leave the Outer Rim alone. That's interesting, and I almost guarantee you was probably part of the setup for the eventual Rangers show, which has since been canceled. Gotta have those launching points, right? But it's interesting, it's interesting. Some interesting world building, and I've got another thought about that, but I'll hold on to that for just a second. Let's get back to the episode proper. Yeah, I like Carson, legitimately. Like, he's kind of legit. And he strikes me as a good cop. Like, you know, I know. The joke is there's no such thing. But no, an actually good cop, right? Someone who is willing to bend the rules when he needs to. Someone who is actually wanting to legitimately help people. Someone whose job it is to protect and serve and means that. Someone who wants to clean up this area, and someone who is paying up enough attention to recognize when things are getting bad. Yeah, Spirit of the Law. Exactly, Spirit of the Law. He's a good dude. And I've liked him every time he's shown up so far. Damn it, Mr. Red. I was going to mention Judy Hopps as an example of a good cop, but I think I'm just ousting myself there. Anyways. So... we also have... I actually looked this up to double check. Would you believe this is the first really alpha canon confirmation of the regions of Star Wars? To explain that briefly, Star Wars has always operated on a tiering system when it comes to canonicity. What that means is these things are always canon, period. These things are generally considered strong canon. Like they did their research. They worked with the other writers. They worked with George or, you know, whoever's the mainliner, like Filoni right now, or Favreau or whoever. And then there's like, I forget what the tertiary layer is, which is probably not canon, but doesn't really contradict anything. And then there's complete nonsense, which has nothing to do with anything. And I think I actually missed a few layers there, but you get the idea. That's always been true ever since they first started the EU. So like the Thrawn trilogy was considered alpha canon for quite a while. That's actually true. No, I'm sorry. The Thrawn trilogy is considered beta canon, one step down below alpha canon. The actual mention of the regions, that's old. That goes back decades. But this is the first time that something that is alpha canon, something that is on-screen live action and clarified as no really canon, has actually confirmed Outer Rim, Mid-Rim, Expansion Region, Inner Rim, Colonies, Core, Deep Core. That's the regions. And that's been the regions for forever. I've gotten the impression before, and I've heard people talk about this, that several people, including Filoni, have been trying to just cherry-pick things from that have been canon for Star Wars for decades, if not years, and then dragging them kicking and screaming into the AU, like, yeah, no, this is a thing now. Okay, there. Stuff like this. And then Baby Yoda steals the poor kid's macarons. Why you gotta be like that, Baby Yoda? Yeah, Bane in the Clone Wars. That's another good example of that. So as usual, the Mando himself only really has his services to trade. But there's this really good tidbit where they're talking about looting the base. Like, the vibe is you want to go knock over an Imperial base so you can grab stuff from it and steal things. And actually, no. Grief's response is, I just want them off my planet. And the way he says that, huge credit to Carl Weathers, because he puts venom in his voice. I don't even manage it just now. He is, like, you could just feel that fiber of anger underneath his words. It goes away almost immediately, but it just rises up there. I want them off my planet. And you can feel that, right? It says a lot about exactly how unwelcome the Galactic Empire absolutely is out here, which, again, kind of leads into something, which I'm going to come back to later. So, okay, we want our trade anchor. We want everyone to feel safe here. We want prosperity for our people. I'm with this. This is cool. Let's do it. So then they go and they knock over the base. Now, we're going to just kind of skip over most of the base because, as I mentioned, there's just not a lot of meat on those bones. They're here to blow it up. Mithrol's awesome. Pluses to Mithrol. How so, Cashel? I must have missed that. Yeah, this is all gameplay, which is fine. And, of course, I do care about gameplay. But it's like, okay. I knew I recognized that troop transport. Push through the base, knock over things. Poor Mithril lost his poor speeder. I feel bad. Although he did get an Imperial troop transport instead, and that's a solid military-grade troop transport, so cool. I had a couple of thoughts during this sequence. Because this is when I started doing my taxes. Oh, I get you, Cashel. I agree with that, but I don't disagree with it enough to care, if that makes any sense. What this reminds me of, more than anything else, is how much the Imperials aren't really communicating with each other. Remember, there's no unified power structure right now, even in the Remnant. And so this feels like Moff Gideon had his thing over here. Probably recently set up, because he was trying to continue his experiments. We'll get to that in just a second. But also, then there's the client who's over here trying to get his thing, and they've just got this one little thing. And you get it, right? What's funny is the Galactic Empire at its height actually had a lot of not communicating with each other, which actually led to problems. It's one of the reasons in the EU they actually crafted the very concept of the Grand Moff thing, which passed borders. But we finally see a hint of what they've been wanting with Baby Yoda since Season 1, Episode 1. He has a high M count, by the way. That is a rare word to be said in any Star Wars thing, because the word midichlorians has been poison ever since Episode 1. But the other more interesting thing is the idea of experimenting with blood transfusions in order to try and craft force sensitivity. When we were putting together our wars, the very first thing we had to do is we had to design exactly how the Force works. And by exactly, I mean imprecisely. We don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole. But we needed to figure out, okay, how does the Force work? I know I keep talking about our wars, but the reason I bring it up is because one of the first questions we ran into is it genetic? Is there such thing as a Force bloodline? Right? And the answer was no. And the reason why was because it opened up the door on a tremendous number of things, all of which had problems, for lack of a better way to put it. What they're doing here is one of those things. If Force power is something that's genetic, that's something that can be manipulated, either through breeding, eugenics, exactly, or through science, through literal transfusions and donors. I mean, organ donation, like where exactly in your genetics is the Force sensitivity? Is that something that can be transferred? In fact, for those of you familiar with the webcomic Darths and Droids, they did an entire story arc across the entire the first three films, entirely devoted towards what would happen if you accidentally gave someone Force powers through a blood transfusion. Exactly, Shadow Machine. So you could see how this is interesting. By the way, I recommend Darths and Droids if you've never read it. It's great stuff. I do think it's actually fallen off a little bit in recent years. I swear that's just not just me being biased towards the sequel trilogy. I just think the quality of the storytelling has gotten a little bit worse. But if I really recommend you go and read that, especially for the prequel trilogy. It's really great stuff. Anyways, so yeah, exactly, Henson. It was really solid. Big thumbs up for me. So yeah, what if the Jedi give blood transfusions? Now we see that it's not that simple, which I'm actually in favor of. They can't just take Baby Yoda's. I keep stuttering over his name because in my head he slotted in as Grogu, but we don't know his name yet. So if they just take Baby Yoda's blood and then transfer it into somebody else, what happens? Now, we see here, it doesn't happen linearly. As the scientist actually flat out says, the body starts to reject the blood at a certain point, and there's some catastrophic results. So there's at least some kind of something on display here that's preventing this from being a thing. But it's also presented as something that can be worked through with enough science and dedication and work. Maybe there would be a way to literally transfuse Force sensitivity to someone, which is interesting. Obviously, this has implications for what Gideon's doing and what he's after, but it also makes me wonder, because we happen to know, and forgive me for spoiling, but spoilers for the sequel trilogy in 3, 2, 1. We know that Snoke was a crafted being. And he also had extremely high power when it comes to telekinesis specifically. Very high Force power with that. And he could use it at range. Food for thought. So we have the escape sequence. Woo! You know what this reminded me of, Mo? Somehow Snoke has returned. This reminded me of the B-1s back in Clone Wars. These poor stormtroopers are just a joke. Escape sequence, escape sequence, escape sequence. I feel bad for the TIEs. Have you ever had to chase a ground vehicle that's slower than you in an aircraft? That sucks. So the ship's repaired, and it's fun, you know. What's really funny In my notes, I flat out said I wish it had been the New Republic ships. I wish it had been Carson who had swooped in to try and to rescue them at the last minute. As I was typing that, we cut to the very next scene, which is Carson and his co-pilot landed on the base and interacting with Grief. Oh, poor baby Yoda. There's this little tidbit here. There's this little tidbit where Carson's talking to Kara, and he says they don't believe there's something going on out here. They're too organized, they're too coordinated. They don't believe it in the core worlds, but it's true. Then he pauses for a moment. He says, "I served during Alderaan." And we need to make Reximus an honorable clone trooper for how much he's taken out of these bots. So yeah, no, I served during Alderaan. Then he pauses, and then he says, "Did you lose anyone?" He's probably lucky she didn't slug him in the face for that. But then he leaves her a New Republic badge, deputizing her and giving her official backing of the New Republic out here. That's interesting to me. And again, was almost assuredly a lead up to the Rangers show, which isn't happening. But there's a lot of implication there. And I realized something. Finally I've got it, okay? If you remember, I talked about how much the sequel trilogy didn't work for me back during the final episode of Andor. You remember that? We had a whole, like, an hour-long discussion about the problems with the sequel trilogy. One of the things I brought up then, for those of you who weren't there for that discussion, is the sequel trilogy doesn't have a through line. There's no spine. There's no structure to the sequel trilogy at all. The prequel trilogy has its thing. It's the build-up and rise of the Galactic Empire and the fall of Anakin Skywalker. The original trilogy has, you know, this thing going on, which is the fall of the Galactic Empire and the death of tyranny. But yeah, you actually see where I'm getting with this place, because what's truly amusing to me is this is a more interesting spine already. Deputizing and granting a degree of official backing to rando people on the Outer Rim to gain their support through support. We got your back. You call us, we're here, right? We're not conquering you. You don't report to us. We're not planting a flag on your planets, but we'll work together. And if you get some issues with pirates or bots or, you know, imp scum, you give us a sign, we got your back. And it feels like a through line of, you're going to hate me for this, Clace, I'm sorry, a through line of preventing the First Order from ever even existing would have been a far more interesting through line for me. Making it so that there's this line of the New Republic having to do things differently, having to deal with these areas differently, having to work not at their best, and dealing. And the reason I'm saying you're going to hate me for this is because the only way that works is if it totally destroys the sequel trilogy. Because as of the sequel trilogy, the First Order is a galactic superpower, which has conquered the galaxy. But yeah, the decentralization. I mean, no, Rex, if this had come out before the sequel trilogy, this could have been paid off in the films. Yeah, no, this doesn't fit the end point. There's this decentralization and this empowerment and this feeling of bonds of fellowship, which is actually a very Star Wars-y kind of a thing, that has nothing to do with the actual sequel trilogy. Or rather, the state of the setting as of the sequel trilogy. Yeah, we do have room. We've got some room. I'm not trying to be too negative. I swear. It's just, it struck me how much more this interested me immediately. And it did it so efficiently. All it had was him slapping down the Republic badge on the thing and walking away, which was actually a really good scene. Speaking of forming something new, then we cut over to Gideon. And Gideon's working on something which looks straight up like Dark Troopers, straight out of Dark Forces, for those of you who played that game. And he's working on an Arquitens, which, nice touch there as well. I have no idea, Cashel. and then cut to credits. Oh yeah, no, this is 100% Star Wars comfort food, which, you're right, they could have done whatever they wanted to with Force Awakens, because Force Awakens was very comfort food. Again, that's not a dig. And yeah, unfortunately, we lost Carrie Fisher, and that sucks. I have nothing good to say about that. I do remember Hamill, Mark Hamill, not doing super well at the time. He's still going. He's still active. I don't know. This is all what if territory. I mean, this is what, when did Force Awakens come out? That would have been 2015. That's actually older than I thought. That tracks, though. Yeah. Christmas of 2015. Yeah, so this has got 5 years. I'm sorry, I'm saying that wrong. The Mandalorian, the episodes we're watching came out around 5 years after Force Awakens. That's a hell of a gap, actually. Yeah, Star Wars doesn't like to recast. I don't agree with why. I'm sorry, that's the nicest way I could possibly say that. Because this is real life. Sometimes you just can't get the same actor back for any kind of reason, right? I understand from the perspective of a fan that recasting is a very dangerous thing to do, as we all saw when they recast Snake over Metal Gear Solid, or when they recast Xehanort in Kingdom Hearts. Like there's several examples when people are like, ah! And yeah, fans tend to be very anti-recasting. And I get that. But sometimes you kind of can't, you know? I mean, obviously Carrie Fisher is a very overt example of this, but sometimes some people just aren't willing to come back, or sometimes they're just too old. Or sometimes they're busy, or sometimes they're retired. Yeah, look at, I like Rogue One a lot, but look at the way they used Tarkin there. They should have just used another actor. I'm sorry, I'm getting way off topic here. Let's go ahead and talk about the episode. Oh, I'm done. Let's go ahead and rate the episode. Let's see here. Although, all that said, I know what you're going to think. Oh, so you're in favor of them using AI to replace actors. No. Damn. Just straight up. No. Damn. I could discuss that at more length, but let's just say no and move on from that. But they gave consent. Yeah, that's cool. You know, weirdly enough, I think I agree that this is an orange. I think it's a low orange for me. I enjoyed both Sanctuary and Eris more, but this was still good, right? I have no particular complaints about the episode. There's some nice world building, there's some good action sequences, and there's some general fun. And I liked Mithril quite a bit. Yeah, low orange is still orange. It's solid. I think I agree. So let's go. Which is this? God, look at that spread on Mando. Look at that spread of episodes. This is a good show. Holy crap. I know that sounds strange. I actually had a thought, I really did, about changing around how the spreadsheet is laid out so that you don't see Arcane and Andor immediately next to everything else. So that people aren't looking at, you know, some of the best shows ever made alongside everything else that we're covering. I mean, tomorrow we're going to start out Cyberpunk. You can't tell me that's going to be better than Andor or Arcane, right? Thank you, little one, very much. I think that's how I'm supposed to pronounce that name. Could you correct me if I'm wrong? I'd really rather get it right. I feel very, very bad. We're finishing Mandor today. I've already committed to it. That's happening. I've heard that I will dislike Cyberpunk. That has nothing to do with the quality of it, just that I will probably dislike it. We'll see. I've heard a lot of weird things over the years. Live Alive, Civilization 6, and FF16. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of anime, so that's going to be fun. And I'm told the subject material is not going to be my thing, and so that'll be fun. But whatever. So yeah, next episode is The Jedi. I can't possibly imagine what this will be about. That's season 2, episode 5. Yeah, someone actually... I can't believe you saw it. Someone actually recommended I go ahead and watch Neon Genesis... That I cover, excuse me. Neon Genesis Evangelion. Which is worse than just watching, because I have to do that with eyes open and with analysis mode on, and that would just be so much more terrible. Anyways, next episodes are pretty long. It's a good 42-minute chonker. So, I'll be back in about 50-ish minutes. What's your question? My favorite lightsaber color? For myself or in general? Probably because they want me to analyze a show they like, Bionic Punk. That's usually why people suggest those kind of things. Both. All right. So for myself, my lightsaber color is and always has been white or silver, one of the two. Of course it is. It's me. For anyone else, I have to admit, make of this what you will, but the classic red has always been a favorite of mine, just for sheer visual aesthetics. Anyways,